Welcome back to the Sports Business Take Podcast, your home for sports industry news with a little personality. I'm Paul Hine. He is Zach Creekmore. How you doing today, Zach?
I'm doing good today, Paul. How are you doing, brother?
I'm great, man. Happy Thanksgiving to all those who celebrated this past weekend. It's been nice to be home for the last week or so. I can't lie, I was getting a little tired of the schoolwork right before I came home. The 80% through the semester fatigue. There's the right word. Yeah, the fatigue of the end of the semester is kicking in. But now I only got one more full week left this week of classes, and then finals week, which I only have one in-person final. So
Wow.
I'm gonna come home for a week and then go just back to do that one final, and then I'm off for 6 weeks.
Wow.
I'm
That's
off
awesome.
until basically my birthday in February. It's crazy. Yeah. I'm excited for that. Hopefully it'll give me a chance to do a lot of freelance clients and stuff. But it's been a long time since we recorded. I looked at our recording thing I was just telling you, and the last time we put out an episode was November 8th. So it's been 3 weeks. Probably my fault mostly. I've had a lot going on. But what have you been up to since the last time we recorded?
Lots of networking, lots of job applications,
Me too.
and lots of traveling. I've been in and out of Connecticut, and of course, holiday season, you're visiting with people and spending a lot of time with those that matter to you. So happy holidays to everyone listening, and happy holidays to you.
Yeah, for sure. What kind of job applications have you been doing? Because it's I've been going through similar things recently. I just want to hear a little bit about that for you.
Yeah, no, good question. Kind of a wide range of roles, right? Because it's interesting to know what I'm capable of, but also know what I'm able to sell myself as, right?
Yeah.
So most recently,
I
I applied for. I attended an event called Lectures on Tap in New York City. What Lectures on Tap does is they effectively take people knowledgeable on topics that are quote unquote interesting, bring them to a bar, have them give a lecture in a bar. And it's effectively like a learning / networking. I wouldn't label it networking, but you're literally doing a lecture in a bar, and it's kind of really cool.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that before.
I think it's something that's totally kind of new.
New, yeah.
But effectively, I applied for a role there as an event host, which would be part-time, but that would be interesting to me, and that would be fun, especially with what I'm wanting to do. Being part of something like that, of putting on and hosting and running events, would be really useful. Because
you would be really good at that.
Yeah,
you have the
that is what my gifting is.
Yeah.
So, and what I'm wanting to do effectively with my life, I guess, is the best way to put it, is to be a brand strategist and experiential marketer, or someone who develops marketing and branding experiences, which would be events. So that would be really valuable to me. So I recently applied to something like that. I'm also applying to. I actually have to finish the application today because it's due tomorrow, and it's going to be a long day of working on it. It's labeled as a creative resident at a marketing firm or experiential marketing firm who helps develop and plays a role in developing those types of concepts and ideas.
Yeah, so you're basically developing campaigns.
Yeah, effectively assisting in developing campaigns, which would be really cool, and it's kind of exactly what I want to do again. So I've been applying for stuff like that. I've also been applying for a bit higher up roles, because again, I trust my ability to do them. It's the question is, can I get the interview? Right?
Right, yeah.
And that's the hardest part, right?
Without the work experience.
Without the work experience, but without directly knowing somebody within the firm. Right, or knowing somebody within the company, which is that's the hardest part.
Going through something similar, actually. So I told you, I've been applying to the MBA, and I got actually to the second round of that process. But as I texted you this a few days ago. We've been talking about it, but it was kind of an interesting interview process. Or at least for the second round, what they had me do was I was recording responses to questions that were asked of me on the computer. So they had their staff members record questions, and then I had to record my answers on their platform as part of an interview. So it wasn't a virtual interview because it was all pre-recorded. And then I had unlimited tries to record my responses, and it was only 3 questions. But it was definitely something that I had never done before, and something that I had never really heard of until I did that. And I wonder if that's kind of a new tactic for interviewing now, where it's okay, we can set this up and we don't have to take the time to fly people in for interviews and do in person or Zoom settings and that kind of thing. And that's what the third round is going to be the in person interviews. So I'm hoping I can get to that. That would be pretty cool. So that's the NBA offices in New York for anyone who didn't understand what I meant. And basically what I'd be doing there is kind of like a digital marketing role. That kind of thing is what I applied for, which would be pretty cool. I don't think I would be doing as much like going out and capturing of content like I have been primarily focusing on with, UMass and my media business and that kind of stuff. But I think it would be a good experience for me to learn kind of the business side of that. You know what I mean? Of the marketing or the digital creative space. So I think that could be a really good opportunity if I end up getting the interview. Hopefully I do. And I also, a week before that, applied with the Savannah Bananas and finished that application. I mentioned, I think the last time that I was about to do that or that they were about to open. And basically what happened with that is also kind of a unique interview process, which I kind of loved because it really made me think outside of the box. They really asked you questions that made you think about how you would be a good fit for their team, but also like how you can make this job fun, which I thought was pretty cool. One of the questions they asked was, if we gave you $20 to spend on anything fun, it could be anything in the world, what would you spend it on? Which I thought was super interesting because they're trying to get to know you as a person, not just as like, oh, this is what you've done with your professional or work life, which I like that. They're actually valuing who they're taking in as a person, not just who they're getting as a worker, which I thought was pretty cool. And then for the first time in my life, I had to do, similar to the MBA application, actually, a pre-recorded video answering some of their questions. So they gave you 3 questions and you had to record your responses about basically what you would want to learn out of the internship and why you wanted to work at the Bananas, that kind of thing. Oh, and then the last one was like, what would you do on a day off? Which again, I like, kind of a fun way to get to know you. So definitely made me think outside of the box, and that was a super interesting learning process in both of those. Between that work and a couple of exams, I've been pretty busy. I just started another application. I spent like an hour the other day on Teamwork Online looking for internships, and I found one at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Ohio, where there's a digital marketing role or like a content role, which was what I'm trying to do. And obviously this summer I'm kind of looking for a paid internship after having done unpaid last summer and unpaid with UMass right now. And it has like a $5,000 stipend and free housing. And I'm like, that sounds pretty damn good to me. So
that does sound great.
And Pro Football Hall of Fame is pretty cool. So I'll be working on that application probably the next week or so. But we just finished up our football season yesterday. Unfortunately, lost to UConn, but it was a great game. I kind of wish, though, that they scheduled it on a different weekend. That's a really good rivalry game.
Absolutely.
Like that's a New England rivalry game. And you scheduled it on the weekend where nobody's on campus because it's Thanksgiving break. And the dorms aren't even open, so like people can't stay overnight. I was just thinking, like, man, this would be great if like we had our actual students here. You know what I mean? It was a great game. We almost won. We lost by 1 touchdown. Yeah, I thought we were going to pull it off at the end. We didn't, but we hopefully better things to come for UMass football in the future. And super excited to get into more of the winter sports, hockey, basketball. Still haven't done men's basketball yet. Going to be excited to do that. So yeah, that's what's been going on in my life.
Awesome, love to hear it. Funny connection, okay? Because I was out till 4 a.m. last night.
It's funny. I texted you this morning, like, are you still good to go? And I saw like you were active at like 2, that you had opened my Instagram DM at like 2 a.m. I was like, are we recording at 7:30 after it goes out until 2?
I met all of my girlfriend's friends last night. And they were chatting.
So the test
but while we were all chatting, one of the girls goes to UConn. I heard about the UConn UMass game and I thought of you. But that's just a really weird connection because
that's funny.
I totally blanked. Like, I should have said, like, oh, one of my friends is working that game. That's kind of sick, right?
Oh, that's funny.
And that would have been a cool thing. Didn't say it at all. I was zoned out. But yeah, I was out.
That's fine, man. That's like that's an environment that you gotta like really keep your wits about you. So I feel you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It was a good time. They were all great people. So it was a blessing to be able to experience and be in that space and see some great friends who I didn't know yet have great conversations, which is really so important. Please.
It really is. And actually that's why I'm like pretty thankful that we're, doing what we are right now, honestly. Having had this experience doing the podcast does make me more comfortable being in front of a camera. And like, I told you before I did the NBA thing, like I was nervous. I was. But you reminded me like, oh, you've done this like, almost 50 times with me.
Like, Paul, dude.
Yeah, I know.
You've done this literally like 2 million times. We're fine.
No, I was tripping for no reason. But but yeah, it is something that you do have to get comfortable with, because that is where the industry is going, and it's a fun way to get to know you. But it definitely can be like intimidating for some people, because they're not good at public speaking or whatever. So that is definitely something to work on. Sure, if you're trying to go work in sports. And speaking of working in sports, this was the one more thing that I had before we actually get to our real topic of the day. I think we had our UMass Sports Management Career Fair last week. So that was one of the other things that's been like really taking up my time, is like preparing for that, going to that, and then following up after that with a lot of the people that I spoke with. It was really cool, man. We had over 50 teams come in and talk to us, which was really awesome. Big name teams, like Diamondbacks, Commanders, Philadelphia Flyers, 76ers, like big name teams. It was pretty cool. We'd say like, also a lot of small New England teams. Obviously all the major New England groups, the Red Sox, the Celtics. Bruins weren't there, but Nesson was.
Okay.
Craft Sports Group was there. That one actually I'm excited for, because I believe they offer like some freelance videography or photography opportunities. So I'm going to try to get hooked up with that, and hopefully that becomes a thing for me. Yeah, spoke to a lot of different teams. I talked to DC United in the MLS. That was pretty cool. If we can apply with the Woo Sox, the Celtics, the Red Sox, and we'll see where it ends up going. Obviously, trying to follow all the teams who I talked with on Teamwork Online, see when their openings up, talk to where it goes. But it was really cool. And it was good to not only network but get that experience of trying to, I guess, sell yourself to somebody in the industry who you've never spoken with before, and also be personable at the same time, not being a robot and being like, I'm so and so, I've done this and that and this, and just doing your elevator pitch, but also trying to have a genuine conversation with them. Other teams I spoke with, I spoke with the AHA, which is like kind of the minor league to the NHL, and along with that, the Springfield Thunderbirds, which is the minor league team of the St. Louis Blues, who are out by UMass in Springfield. And so hopefully they will have some freelance opportunities for me as well. So yeah, a lot of good things to come out of that. I'm waiting to hear back from some teams, but definitely made a lot of good connections. It was a really cool experience.
Beautiful. Great to hear. And we can't say just how important networking is and how important getting your name out there and speaking to people, whether it's through LinkedIn, whether it's through email, whether it's through you're making a spontaneous phone call and hoping somebody picks up. It is worth your time. If you're questioning if it's worth your time, it is worth your time. There's a reason that it's the only thing teachers talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And your efforts don't go unnoticed too, when you actually try to go differentiate yourself through doing work experiences and through doing things like we're doing right now. I actually had several recruiters say to me like, "Oh wow, you have a lot of experience, like for someone your age." I was like, "Wow, thank you." Like that, seriously, I took that as a huge compliment. Like
absolutely.
that's what I've tried to do, is just put myself in the best possible position to be successful. So no, that was definitely good to hear. I'm going to continue to try to do that. And are you? Let's get on. Spend 20 minutes. Let's talk about our
20 minutes of job applications, catching up, and networking advice.
No,
let's get into the actual topic.
Yeah, today we're talking about Clemson's approach to NIL and how they're going to deal with the NCAA settlement that allowed student athletes to be paid and student athletes to get paid as well. So they're taking kind of a front office approach. That this was announced this past Tuesday, and they'll manage NIL contracts while also creating an in-house agency with Everett Sports Marketing, which is a sports marketing agency. They handle deals for for individual clients and for teams to help athletes navigate NIL offers and connect them with businesses. I think this is a very, very unique approach to dealing with NIL, and I think it's something that the industry is going to learn from. We actually have already seen people start to follow them, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I sent you a post this morning that Andrew Luck had been named like the general manager of Stanford Athletics. That was super interesting to me because, again, that's following that front office structure and dealing with how you build your athletic department in a Division One athletic situation where you need help with NIL and you need a bunch of resources. So, what do you think about that kind of front office approach?
Well, I think generally, right, it is the right approach, right? Because we're taking a model that has worked for professional sport teams throughout the last however many years, 100 plus, right? And applying it to a new entity that's becoming more valuable and is growing. So it's super interesting to see, but also totally makes sense, right? It's saying, okay, we're becoming an entity that deals with more money, deals with more marketing opportunities, deals with more businesses, deals with more media opportunities. How can we best leverage this and how can we handle this to the best of our abilities? And the reality is you need to hire more people. And a lot of it's great because in the sports industry, it's going to create a lot more jobs because there's however many D1 schools, and that's going to be a massive increase, especially for people who are in sports marketing. And I don't think every school will hire a firm. I think some schools will also actually generate and grow and build their own front office sports teams like Stanford is doing. So we'll totally see in the direction of this goes, but they're mirroring the professional teams. They're handling more money and they're seeing it grow. I think it's a great, great concept and a really realistic way to apply and deal with the NIL situation.
Sports has become more like professional sports than ever in the history of college sports. You know what I mean? They are closer now to being professionals than they ever have been. And so it makes the most sense to treat them like professionals because that's really what they are with the amount of money that they're bringing in for the school. Specifically, with football, and we can get into how that breaks down later in the payments. But the new positions in the front office will focus on revenue generation, which essentially is going to be, you're getting new sponsors, which is great because then you're starting to bring in new streams. Then you're starting to be able to pay your athletes more, and actually be able to deal with the fact that this NCAA settlement is, making it so that athletes can get paid. Otherwise, the school doesn't have, existing money or at least they're taking away from other areas to fund the athletes getting paid. But now you have a way to create new revenue streams and make that growth happen. So just a little quote here. What's really unique for Clemson is, for the most part, they own their own MRR, multimedia rights, which is extremely advantageous. This is somebody from Everett Sports Marketing. So Everett said this kind of greases the wheel on deal procurement and execution because you have the ability to support and represent the talent at a very high level, and you have the assets in-house, and there's no third party inside of that. So essentially, they're saying it cuts out the middleman. You can grow together with this new in-house agency to be able to make new deals for your athletes. What do you think about that kind of collaborative approach with a sports agency where they're getting outside help from people who have done this for a professional, in a professional setting?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, this is really interesting because a great person to talk about this would be our past guest, Mr. Eric Bechtel.
Definitely.
And because that is exactly what his company does, right? So there are numerous sports agencies or sports marketing agencies or firms, small and big, that go and tackle and handle these types of projects for companies. Whether it be you're working with a smaller company or a larger company, you're trying to generate opportunities for them to network and build connections. And that is exactly what Clemson is hiring someone to do. Now, we're not used to a sports team being the one to hire them, although that is quite realistic if a smaller sports team is willing to say, would I say outboard? No, that's not the right term. Outsource, thank you. Outsource that resource. So it's definitely something that we've seen happen. It's definitely an industry trend and industry commonality to hire people to handle these types of partnerships and make something unique happen, which is exactly where we want to go with this. And I think it's now Clemson is not generating jobs through this, but they're hiring people who are industry experts. And that's exactly what colleges in this situation, when they don't have expertise or experience in this, that's exactly what they need to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. So, in addition to creating the agency, which is really going to provide great resources, they're also going to share about $20.5 million with athletes after the settlement, and they're being one of the first schools to announce this type of plan. Do you think other schools will start to follow with creating the in-house agencies and working with sports marketing companies, as well as sharing that type of money and announcing that the specific dollar amount out there?
Well, I think it's interesting because I would define everything that we're seeing happen as a case study, right? Everything that's being
Definitely.
done will be a case study to see how the industry should do this. Now, when it becomes interesting is, will someone build a different model? Will someone do it differently? And that's when we start to see this differentiation. But right now, Clemson is the first people to do it. They're the only people to do it in a clear and understandable way. And we will have to see how the rest of the industry adjusts. I will think they're definitely taking charge. They're definitely confident with their concept, and they're going to go through with it. So you just got to wait to see what happens. And if they're massively successful, it's absolutely where the industry will go. And if they tank and fail, the industry will go in a completely different direction. Which,
Yeah.
not to put all the weight on Clemson,
Well, I
but
don't
oh
think it
my
will
gosh,
be.
all the weight is on you.
I think like some schools will simultaneously try a similar thing, and they see, oh, they're doing it this way. We may not have a plan yet to handle it. Let's kind of follow
Mm,
them or copy their type of blueprint. I think I mentioned Andrew Luck is becoming the GM of Stanford Athletics earlier. I think that's maybe what they're trying to do there, and I think it's a pretty smart approach because part of the front office's responsibility is, this is a quote from Clemson AD Graham Neff, to oversee contract details, compliance, and allocation strategy, figuring out how much revenue share should go to each sport and to individual athletes. This role is really about how their money, their revenue generation, breaks down and gets distributed to their athletes, how you break it down with past athletes, current athletes, and what the balance looks like between sports, and how you balance your most revenue generating sports like football and basketball with your maybe not necessarily not as much revenue generating sports like lacrosse, soccer, baseball, etc. So I think that's super interesting, and that's something that is very needed in this, because you and I talked about a few months ago when the NCAA settlement came out. How is this going to be broken down? What is the strategy to distributing all that money? How does it get fairly or equitably distributed?
mm,
And I think this is a good time to mention the way that they're thinking about doing it. This hasn't been necessarily confirmed yet as what they're going to do, but I think their revenue sharing distribution proposal is that it's a 75-15-5% model. So this
mm.
means that 75% of the revenue would go to football players, past and present, 15% to men's basketball, and 5% to women's basketball and other sports. So what do we think about this proposed model? Is it fair? Is it equitable? What would we do differently? Like, what do you think about the 75-15-5 model? If they choose to do it, they haven't specifically stated that that's how they're going to do it yet.
They're test running and they're sharing concepts, absolutely. And I think a good insight into these marketing firms is what they do is they take and they create multiple ideas and then they bring it forward to these people and say, here's a bunch of ideas we have. And they probably fine tune it to three or two. And then they share those concepts with this company and then try to go from there. So that's exactly what this marketing firm they hired are doing in terms of this process. I would say that realistically, when you think Clemson football. And I don't know how dominant their other sports are. I think they're pretty well known in soccer. They're pretty well known in baseball. I would say they're pretty well known in general.
Yeah,
But it's a
soccer.
challenging thing
Soccer's
because
good
you have
there
to
too.
go and think what built that academic and athletic history at Clemson. And when you think of that, I would probably say it's the football program. Um, which would mean that the 75% sure might be actually valid. The 15% then to basketball, sure, because that's really strong in terms of revenue generation.
Yeah,
It makes sense. I don't know how
basketball is one of
strong
their stronger
Clemson.
sports.
Okay, so one of their stronger sports, valid. And then I would the 5% for other teams, sure, but it's a difficult thing to say, right? Because then you're valuing different athletes based on their sports, which we see in professional sports. So it's definitely going to be a kind of case study to see what they actually choose to do.
Yeah,
I think 75% might be a little bit too much just because it takes away so much from other sports and other sporting opportunities.
I tend to agree, and I think the difference there's a very distinct difference between the two questions of is it fair and is it equitable.
Mm, well
Well,
said.
in terms of fairness, obviously you won't be having everybody be paid equally, but I think there is a world where you can pay everybody a decent percentage. I think
Hmm.
5% between all other sports. Think about a Division One school typically offers over 20 sports. That's
It's
5%
very
between
quick.
18, 18 to 20 plus teams. Depending
Yeah,
on how many sports are offered
growing.
in that kind of model. So I don't necessarily think that's fair to a lot of those athletes who are going to be getting a lot smaller slice of the pie
Hmm.
than the ones who are under the 75%. Although I do understand, the football programs, they have big rosters, right? So that does get split up. That does get split up more than in other programs. Basketball, obviously, as many people on the team as there would be in football, which has 100 plus.
Absolutely.
But in terms of is it equitable, you got to think, you really got to look at a school by school basis of what percent of revenue is our football program and our media rights deals that come from that football program. That's the big thing is the media rights deals. That's where most of the money comes from, and we know that anybody who works in the sports industry knows that media rights is king, especially in college sports. Also for merchandise too. Merchandise is probably the second biggest factor in terms of revenue generation in college sports. What sells the most out of all sports programs? Usually the football gear. Specifically at places like Clemson, where there is a rich history of winning and tradition under their football program. In terms of making it equitable, I agree with you in that 75% may be a little bit too much. I think it would probably be better to have more of like 65, 15, 20 model. That would be a little bit more equitable than what we're seeing under this proposed model, which hasn't been chosen yet, by the way, just to put that out there. But what would you do differently than the 75, 15, 5 model?
I think it's a good question. My biggest question goes towards how does Title IX adjust and impact this?
That's a
And
great point.
what does that really mean in terms of college sports? Because effectively, what we're saying here is we value men's football, we value men's basketball, all the women's sports can go.
That is a great point.
And I'm not trying to be harsh or realistic, and we could also go into the conversation where the conversation immediately goes is okay, but women's sports generate less revenue, and sure, maybe that's true, but that's not always true. Look at UConn women's basketball. Look at other terms of case studies. Probably look at UNC with field hockey and just how big of an entity that is. The fact that I even heard of them through field hockey, that's a pretty big deal. Total sidebar, but important sidebar of like, yeah, there's stuff going on in women's field hockey. There's stuff going on in women's volleyball.
Women's
Women's
sports,
volleyball is
yeah.
a very quickly growing entity. At some schools, especially in the Midwest, women's volleyball is one of the biggest sports. It's exciting. It's entertaining. They pack 70,000 plus seater stadiums, right? So there's going to be schools where this needs to be different. So to make sure that it's not everybody's just going, okay, football, okay, basketball, everybody else, you're in the corner. Not to put that into a stereotype or a thought process. So I would need to directly look at Clemson's revenue generation, look at where people are in terms of, okay, what sports is Clemson talked about the most in terms of media generation, in terms of possible sponsorships, what is popular in their area, right? Where is there possibility of further and growing revenue generation, right? Because we're already talking about football. Football has a pretty high ceiling, but I would say the football revenue generation is probably close to its ceiling already. Right? It's going to be hard to get more. Right? But if you're looking at a sport like soccer, right, in terms of college sponsorships and you're trying to grow it in that community, and Clemson is in South Carolina, you've got a couple soccer teams in that area, especially USL, but additionally you have an MLS team there. How can you grow that and grow that networking connection? How can you use alumni who are playing professional leagues there? What stories can you tell? And that's where I think, for me, because I'm a little niche guy sometimes. All right, I'm gonna be honest with it. Of That's where I would see the most interest of how can I grow these smaller entities to make them more valuable and make Clemson more valuable as an entire athletic entity rather than just solely focusing on their large properties in terms of football, in terms of basketball. How can we grow these smaller properties through partnerships and through business generation to see something really unique happen?
Why not focus on some of your weaker areas to try to see if you can grow them to be an area of strength, and really put your efforts into that. And I think part of the answer is that putting on events like football and basketball requires a lot of manpower, which I've seen firsthand for myself. We probably have a few hundred people working the football game, I would guess.
Wow.
And that's at UMass. That's not at an SEC school or at Clemson. UMass football is still a Division I school, but we're not in an environment where it's a 100,000 person stadium. You know what I mean? We have 17,000 seats, so it's not even comparable in terms of the manpower you're going to need to be able to put on an event like that. I think that's why a lot of the resources get directed there, is because you need those resources to be able to put on that event. But in the same token, you could grow your other sports to be similar types of events where people do value them at a higher value than they currently are now. And you do that through your marketing. And like you mentioned, your alumni connections and making sure the program tradition and history is really celebrated. That's something that doesn't necessarily happen as much as in football or basketball with the other sports. So I do think that's an area for improvement. And you mentioned Title IX, which is a whole nother thing to unpack. And I think, to me, you're right. That would have a huge impact on how you split the money up, because women's sports deserve their fair share under Title IX, as they should. And a school has to offer within 5% of like roster spots for women's sports as they do for men's sports under Title IX. I learned that in Gary Stevens, shout out.
We love you, Gary.
Stevens class, freshman year. But so they have to have within 5% of women's roster spots as men's. So in order to do that, you can't necessarily not fund the women's programs. You know what I mean? You have to fund the women's programs in order to make that Title IX compatible. And I think in doing so, in trying to grow the revenue generation through the women's programs, I think I agree with you in the sense that that's an area where they really could make a strong suit. But I really don't, like, as of right now, I see them focusing on college football as the kind of the test revenue source for how this model is going to work, because it's where they can make the most money at first, and then maybe they'll branch out into some of those smaller sports.
Absolutely, well said. And I think part one, going back to the Title IX, is I don't know if this Title IX actually applies to this, because Title IX is very specific, or in my opinion, and from my understanding, is specific to sporting opportunities, but does not talk about in terms of revenue generation and money.
No, it doesn't. Which is why I said roster spots and made that distinction.
Correct. So there's a case where, well, you have to make sure that you're also focusing and maintaining a Title IX compliance, but how you deal with your money is not directly impacted by Title IX, which to the normal or regular viewer who's not in the sports world might be a bit confusing. So just to make it an important comparison of Title IX regulation on this might not actually happen, which means that the question is that if we're dedicating all our time to one entity, we have to make sure that we're also dedicating time to those other entities in terms of media power, the work that we're putting into it, the way that we're advertising them. That all has to be somewhat equitable. So, for example, like at St. Joe's, a massive problem, or not a massive problem, but something that comes up a lot is like the swim team, right? The swim team doesn't get a lot of media coverage, right? Because swim, one, is hard to shoot. Nobody wants to be in a steaming hot pool taking pictures. It's hard to take a good picture of swim.
Yeah,
right?
and also it's hard to have the equipment in there because if it gets wet, it can get ruined.
Exactly. right? So there's a lot of these different challenges. So swim doesn't get all this attention, but the swim players are like, oh, I want the attention. So they email the AD and they're like, hey, I don't feel this is Title IX compliant. And then it becomes this whole cycle. Even as a camera guy, if I was shooting for swim, I'd be like, I don't know how to shoot swim. It's like a weird thing.
I mean, so I shot it a little bit. You remember the one time I was at your swim meet and I put together that was when I was first starting. It was a horrible video for you, but
I didn't want to tell you that at the time. I was
No, I know. Like that was when I was first starting. Looking back at that now, like that's disgusting. But
we all start somewhere.
Right, swim is hard to shoot. Like you can get pictures of people coming out of the water and stuff like that look pretty cool. But I think the bigger challenge in that one specifically is the, like I mentioned, the equipment getting wet and like people don't want to ruin their cameras and that kind of thing. That's a good example of a lot of these smaller sports where it is hard to remain compliant because of outside factors. Revenue generation is not specifically mentioned in Title IX, but I wonder if now that this is becoming the way that the industry is going in college sports, that you are going to have to pay athletes, if Title IX will be amended to account for that.
Okay, my camera caught up. Cool. So, pretty much important detail here, right? Title IX does not directly apply to money. And that's going to make a big difference. So then I would say that. Oh, absolutely. I don't know if Title IX would be amended, but I would think that they're going to create legislation that applies to it. Absolutely. No question in my mind.
Yeah.
I would then go to say that, okay, this is really just a trial run. I would make sure that this 75, 15, 5 is not just okay, this is what we're doing forever. That's not okay.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't know how the sports world is changing. You don't know what's going to happen after the 2026 World Cup. You don't know how volleyball is going to grow. You don't know what's going to be that next big sport. And what happens when like a pickleball joins in, right, as a collegiate sport in a couple of years. What happens when we add entities and they start to grow? How does that change and impact the world? And that's the number one question that comes to my mind. So I would say you have to have a way to change and amend this percentage system while also maintaining your focus on growing the entire entity as a whole.
At least in the 21st century, sports has been good about adapting to change, taking on new strategies. So I do think having this front office approach specifically, and creating new positions for people to be able to focus on this and not having it be part of coaches or recruiters' jobs, dealing with NIL and how the revenue gets separated and not putting it on the athletic director specifically. I think that is going to be a huge help because I don't think there was enough manpower to deal with the NIL issue before. I've already seen it's pushed a lot of coaches out of college sports where it wasn't the same job that they used to have. It was, I have to promise this player X amount of dollars and this player this amount of dollars, and how do I balance this budget that I'm given? And that wasn't the job that they had before. It was about coaching the players and developing good people and developing team chemistry and all that sorts of things. So how do you back? Yes.
Yeah, we win.
I can hear you.
They can try and defeat us, but we fight.
So I'm gonna edit the last 10 minutes out, but you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna create a little sped up reel.
Oh my gosh, that would be great.
Of what just happened to me, just calling you on the phone and then putting the mic down.
I wonder if it'll have me popping back into the studio and being elated and then it not working and then me leaving the studio again and then popping back in. I really hope it does.
Yeah, we'll have to see how the recording comes out. This is going to be a mess to sort out because we're each going to have 2 or 3 tracks.
I mean, make it multiple parts of an episode. Okay, you get this little portion, now you get this little portion, now you get this.
We might have to do that. We'll see how the editing is because, geez, man. I
might have 6 tracks. I'm not even kidding you. I might have 6.
This is gonna be oh god. I can't wait to edit this. Yay!
Videographer wanting to murder me right
now. No. It's all good. I just have a lot to do today, and I have to go back to school at some point.
So might be Christmas time. Where
were we? We were talking about Title IX.
Title IX, Clemson. I have no idea where we were. All I know is what's in my head is Clemson has a good model to start. It has to be. It can't be Steady Eddie. It has to be Norman. I don't know.
Adaptable.
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 I don't. I can't find a name that rhymes with adaptable. But if you can, please just send it to us because I might need to use that in the future.
Okay, so I want to mention one more aspect about Clemson's plans. So they're also adding 150 new scholarships across their athletics, estimating about $6 million added to their budget. So that's really taking advantage of the opportunity that is given to you by this NCAA settlement, allowing athletes or creating opportunities for athletes to better themselves, right? And you're thinking about those scholarships across their athletics. It's not just going to go to football. Meaning across the athletics is a more equitable, what we were just talking about, approach to at least scholarships in terms of they're going to be spread out. I think this is a really good thing for a lot of people that maybe couldn't afford to go to the school otherwise. A lot of kids who play Division I athletics are counting on those scholarships to be able to go to school there and stay there and about their dreams of playing college sports and potentially going to play pro. So I think this is going to create a lot of new opportunities for a lot of people. Do you think a lot of schools will follow a similar type of approach where they're going to add a more number of scholarships after the NCAA settlement?
I would hope so, right? Because really, what we would like to see for this is for this to make more opportunities for college athletes, and make college and education more accessible. And I think that would be a great storyline for the NCAA to tell as they try to say reason and legalize this more professional sports model. Um, so as not legalized literally, but figuratively. Um, in that sense. So I think this is a great way and great direction for them to go. And I really hope that's what schools will choose to do. Because, right, that's saying, okay, we have the opportunity to make more money. We have the opportunity to bless our athletes. Let's create more opportunities. Let's create more sponsorships. Let's do these things. It's door opening, not door closing. Exactly what we want to see the professional world be, but exactly what we want to see from our economics, exactly what we want to see from our housing market, exactly what we want to see from our sports teams.
Absolutely. I think that opening doors phrase is perfect. And I think that really sums up this whole approach that they're taking with the front office and also with the scholarships and what they're actually paying the athletes. But specifically, I think this is an opportunity for growth for the college sports industry. I think really teams can learn from this. And like you said earlier, this is going to be a case study in, is this type of approach going to work? And if not, how would we change it? And how would we do things differently? Maybe how would we take a different approach? And what is going to work best to be both equitable and fair to the athletes, but also assist the university in the growth of their athletic department and their enrollment and their brand image, etc. I think that's really the things to come in the future out of this approach. And I think that's about all the thoughts that I have on this, unless you want to add something else.
No, ditto. I agree. I really think that Clemson is doing a good job here. One, being industry leaders. One, getting ahead. Maybe not
Innovative.
getting ahead, but making movement on this and making an impact for their athletes. It's a beautiful thing to see, and I really hope that it goes well for them. Really hope that this becomes an adaptable type of thing that we can really see them focus on growing the entirety of the entity rather than focusing on their one high revenue generating sport. My biggest fear is that schools are going to say, okay, we're just going to focus on where we can make the most money right now, and then they're not going to take a 10, 20-year plan and really seek to grow the entirety of the entity. I would love to see college sports become 4+ communities find important. Creates more opportunities and more interesting things to see in our media and to see in our world. So I'd really like them to focus on that.
Been thinking about a lot lately, but that's long-term fans over short-term profits.
Mm.
I think that's the exact approach you're talking about, where it's how do we build our game and our product over decades, or half decades versus, okay, we can make X amount of dollars this year in this sport compared to X amount of dollars or Y amount of dollars this year in the other sport. I hope that that's kind of the approach that the front office will the new front offices will be able to take this under this front office model with college sports, and hopefully that's the direction that they go, is prioritizing the growth of the whole university and not just a singular sport. So don't get us wrong, that singular sport is going to be vital in the growth of all of those sports. That's probably the jumping point or the starting point to everything. Unless you have anything else you got.
My one statement is, if they don't just do that, they should hire us. Statement.
I mean, hey, I wouldn't be opposed. Actually, I looked into a graduate assistant program at Clemson where you get to go work in their social media department, and they pay like for your master's and your housing.
Oh wow! Do they pay for you like your whole master's?
No specific details.
I would suggest that it's a portion.
It might be. I don't know specific details yet, but that's something that I might look into, because that would be a really cool opportunity.
Oh, absolutely.
Get more experience. And I actually don't think I told you this yet. I think I've decided that I might want to go work in college athletics, like right out of college. Like I might want to go work.
That would be sick.
I think I would want to go work for like an SEC team, you know what I mean? And just experience, or some really big sports school where, not that UMass isn't, but you can experience that environment of like 100,000 person stadium and get to be part of that atmosphere. And college sports, the culture is just so rich and so traditional. It's unlike any of the pro sports that we have here in America. It's something completely separate and unique, and I think that's what makes it beautiful, and that's why I personally want to go work in it, and that's why we end up talking about it a lot. It's why it's part of the mainstream culture here in America, is because we've built that tradition, and I think people are really passionate about their schools, and that's something that you can identify with.
Absolutely.
So on that note, I think that's enough college sports talk for the day. So hopefully we will see you again soon, and it won't be 3 weeks of a break this time. I won't be at school for that much longer this semester anyway, so hopefully that will be helpful, getting us back to like one episode a week, or at least as close to that as we can get to. I don't know if that's going to happen, but yeah, we'll see what we can do. But
hopefully more content for you. And for
definitely. I've been lacking a little bit on the content producing.
I have to. We've been on the struggle bus.
No, yeah, for sure. All right, y'all. Have a good week, and we'll see you soon.